Welcome back to the Behind the Well show. I'm your host, Roger Abel, back with Elias Randall. Elias, what's going on this week?
So this week is it's an exciting week. So August is just around the corner here, and this weekend we have our football officiating clinic for our college conference staff meeting. So it might seem like it's still far away, but for me, the football season is starting, and that's an exciting time of year. And probably the other day, someone asked me, "What's your favorite time of year?" And I said, "The fall." And they laughed. They said, "Is that because that's when football season is?" I said, "Yeah, if they move football season to the spring will be my favorite time of year."
That's a good one.
A lot going on. It'll be good to, and by the time I don't want to go off on officiating, but by this point in the year, we already know the new rule changes. So the staff meeting is more about things that we want to work on as a staff to get better, crew preparation and all that. But it's an exciting time of year heading into August. I love it.
My football season starts too.
In August? Well, you got fantasy
team.
Fantasy draft. That's just as important as the American Rivers Conference staff meeting.
But it kicked off last night too because I started watching Wide Receiver on Netflix.
I heard that's pretty good.
Well, I turned it on and then I fell asleep, but I watched enough to see who was on it. It's Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, George Kittle's on it.
Yeah.
My favorite player, Deebo Samuel's on it.
They got good players on there.
And there's Justin Jefferson's on it. But for those of you who don't know, Deebo Samuel right now is my favorite NFL football player.
That's a really good pick. Deebo's fun to – he's sometimes the plays he makes, it's like watching a backyard – he's making a backyard football play, like a cut or something that he'll make in the NFL game. And it's unbelievable.
What's he weigh? I mean, he's like a truck. And Megan had never watched – so Megan was watching it.
For his size, I bet he weighs more than what people think. He's jacked.
For like 260?
He's huge, yeah.
So Megan was
watching. Does he really weigh that much?
I don't know. I'm going to guess. Megan started watching. She goes, "Oh, yeah, he is fun." Because, he's so big, he's just running people over. But right now in the NFL, that's my favorite player to watch. And it's always fun to watch George Kittle, being a Hawkeye fan,
Yeah, Kittle's a good – he's great. He's a good blocker, good receiver. He does everything well.
Okay, Debo's actually smaller than I thought, but, man, he's built 6 foot 215 is what they have him at on the NFL.com website.
Yeah, and that's a Jack 215. He's a stout dude.
Yeah. So anyway, my football season's also kicked off. Thank you very much. One of the things I've been paying attention to, and I think it's actually been the talk of our industry for probably the better part of a year and a half, is what's happening in the world of artificial intelligence and AI. Okay. And there's an article on CNBC that caught my eye, and it was talking about the movie Thelma and how the growing AI voice scams are really becoming prevalent. And back in that movie, she had a frantic call from a family member, "I need some money." So she gathered up all the hidden money around the place and was going to try to get it to him. Well, we know these scams are going on, but with AI, it's becoming significantly easier to take your voice, take AI software, and pull a scam on people. They only need a couple minutes of my audio, which you could get right from any of our shows.
Right, and then they can use your voice.
It sounds like me. So people really need to be aware that these scams are getting significantly more sophisticated. It's no longer, somebody from a foreign country that, you don't understand maybe too well what they're saying. Now it sounds like somebody you know.
So and it's really sad, but as we know, there's a lot of scams targeted towards seniors here in America. And part of the reason is people of that age tend to have all the money, right? Like most people with money are older. I actually might start recommending to our older clients that if you're going to talk about money, it's only an in-person conversation.
That's tough.
It is tough, but if people are running scams, you got to protect yourself. Or maybe if it needs to be remote, it's a FaceTime. So then you're talking to your family member.
Yes, but there's another way you could do it.
And what is that?
I will call you back on a known number.
That's a great strategy too.
If your grandson or whoever's telling you they need money, hey, great, I need to call you back. I'll call you on your cell phone. Everybody has their cell phone with them. How else are they calling you?
Right.
Because it's almost
I'll call
like,
you back, and then you're calling the person you need to be
think about when, a good example, we were filming a show here the other day, and I got an email from a client. Hey, I need to take some funds out. Well, we don't take the funds out. I sent him an email back. I said, we will call and verify with you. We're going to call a known number to verify that they want these funds and what the instructions are. We're not just going to take a random email
and send money somewhere. Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
We just verify it. And I think that, people just need to be aware that it's getting significantly more sophisticated, the scams. The other thing that I found is really just scary about AI in general is it's hard to know what's actually real anymore.
Especially with the
all the deep fakes,
the clips and the fake. Yeah,
like what's actually real, because they can take this and just meld it and make anything they want. It's really kind of scary to try to disseminate what's real, what's not. It goes back to my wife and I were doing some medical stuff, and I'll never forget, the doctor said, here's the deal. While you're doing this, I'm sure you're going to go out and search the internet and get information. He goes, but the only information I want you to actually put any kind of validity into is if that website ends in .edu or .gov, which means it's a government website or it's from an educational institution. He said, if it ends in .com, that's somebody's opinion.
And you don't know that person.
Correct. So I've always taken that with me when I'm reading. Like sometimes I'll read stuff about diet or exercise. I'm always looking for .edu or .gov at the end, because likely it's less opinion and more, fact-based evidence of what I'm looking for.
Right, and it's not just a random opinion of anyone.
Well, anybody can go put anything they want for the most part. I mean, we're regulated, but if you're just an average person out there, you can post whatever you want on social media for the most part.
Yeah, and we were just talking football. I saw a Nick Saban quote the other day. Nick Saban said, "Don't let someone living in their parents' basement dictate how you feel." I thought that's really good.
Well, yeah, because
good.
Let's be honest. Those are the people, going
the
and
trolls,
giving the trolls that are out there, and it's not just them. I mean, hey, look, I've probably trolled somebody in the past, not intentionally, but when it, you review what you said, you're like, oh, that was kind of like trolling them. Like, they didn't like what I said.
Probably shouldn't have said that.
Yeah. Well, I don't post a whole lot on social media. Molly does most of that for me anymore. I don't see a whole lot of benefit in spending too much time on that.
Yep. So the other, with the end of summer around the corner here, and we're heading into August now. So something that not everyone, but people with kids who are going to school are going to start their back to school shopping. So I was looking at this report from NerdWallet about back to school shopping and how people fund it. And it's, especially now with the last couple of years with inflation, and we know that a lot of the excess money in the economy's dried up, right? And even now the Federal Reserve's expected to lower rates here in the fall because of they need to start maybe easing the monetary situation because things are getting tight on people. So it's showing the funds that families are going to use to facilitate their back-to-school shopping. And here's the good news. The vast majority, most people are primarily using a credit card. And I think it's these numbers add up to over 100. So I'm guessing it's some people are using cash, some people are and a credit card, some people are using a debit card and a credit card. But 60% of people are primarily using a debit card. So that's a good thing, right? Just using cash that's available. And then it says 58% of people using a credit card as well. So I think there's overlap in that. But hopefully people can get through the back-to-school shopping season, use your available cash, use your bank accounts. And I really hope people are not having to, one, pull money out of savings like an emergency fund, to fund these purchases, or using credit cards and taking on debt just to get their kids back to school with the proper supplies.
Well, and I think it lends itself to another situation. We actually alluded to this a little bit before the show started. It's not just the individual families that are doing back to school shopping. It's the educators as well. And, I shared what we do for the teachers that our kids are in their class. And, most of the teachers now put a wish list out on Amazon or somewhere. And if you have the ability to help the teacher, educator buy some of this stuff, if you look at the stuff they're asking for, it's not like they're asking for help with outlandish stuff, right? It's not like they want fancy stuff. It's the basic necessities like markers and pens and, tablets and folders. Find a way to help them. I know Molly mentioned that she took a bunch of our old folders we had and took them to her sister up in Minnesota, I think, to their school, because we had like 500 folders and we don't use them anymore. These are old, outdated folders, and they love them. So there might be ways you can help out, educators or people that are teaching your kids, and if not, just find an item on their wish list that you can help them out with and buy if you're in a position to do that.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. And it's really, when I see those lists, I mean, it's nice that the teachers are putting that out, but it's also sad that the teachers have to kind of bear that burden. It's all stuff they need for their classroom. It's always amazing to me how that stuff's just not provided.
Well, think about this. It's just like any job, athletic event, sporting event. If you're not given the proper tools, what's the outcome going to be like? They're teaching your kids. I mean,
yeah. Hopefully,
think about this.
You want them to have
the
less
tools,
stress about things that don't matter, so then they can focus on
just the general
education.
tools to make sure your kids get the Mac. We live in the world of like optimal outcomes. Well, the optimal outcome is if this individual teacher needs these things, how do we figure out how to get it there? Because they believe that provides the optimal outcome.
Yeah, I think, another thought I had when I was looking through this and reading it, and this article highlighted something that I think is in line with other things that we talk about related to money. And there are parents that would take on debt for a kid's social standing. So I think another way to say that, it's another version of keeping up with the Joneses. And I think one thing that most people who are successful with money all have in common is they're not concerned with keeping up with the Joneses. So if you can afford a good backpack, you don't need to go out and buy a backpack that's going to increase your kids' social standing. And I think it's important to keep in mind that financing that stuff on a credit card that's unnecessary, it's going to set you back. That's not going to help move your family forward in a positive direction.
I'll give you an example. It's a great example. Let's talk about backpacks for a second. You can spend a little or you can spend a lot, right?
Correct. You should buy a good one.
Well, if you're going to buy a good one, ideally you would get multiple years of use out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you go buy, like my wife tends to buy pretty nice backpacks, but we use them basically until they outgrow it. They're not getting a new one every year. But some kids want to have a new character or whatever on their backpack. If you know you're going to buy a new backpack every year, why would you go spend a whole bunch of money on a fancy backpack if you're getting a new one each year? It's just kind of...
Yes, and I'm with you. If you're spending the money, it's a quality purchase. That's one thing. But like if you're spending excess money because the backpack you have has Pikachu on it, but then they want a different Pokemon character, and that's the only difference. Like you just don't need to spend that money.
Yeah, or just buy a less expensive Pokemon or Pikachu one that you can afford to replace every year.
It's not Pokemon, it's Pokemon.
A Pokemon, I'm sorry.
The Pokemon.
I never had any cards. I'm sorry.
My kids are getting into it now, so I'm
Pokemon?
Yes, I'm getting educated on the different types, the different characters, and all that.
My kids are into making friendship bracelets and mini brands. And don't ask me what mini brands are.
Good.
Toy, but whatever. Another thing I noticed came out, Think Advisor released some new stats on the rise of IRAs and 401ks. And, I saw this article and I'm like, well, of course there's a rise in people who own IRAs and people who own 401ks because we basically forced that to be the default retirement mechanism away from defined benefit and pension plans in the past. But one thing I thought that was good, median account balances grew from 2019 to 2022 by 15%. So that's a big improvement. And a couple other things that I took away from it is that there's definitely a trend towards people owning Roth IRAs. Like the ownership of Roth IRAs is up pretty substantially over the last few years. And
what do you think some of the reasons for that are?
I'm going to guess a lot of it has to do with media. That would be my guess.
There's more content around why that type of account is beneficial.
Yeah. So here's a stat I was looking for. In 2022, 16% of families owned Roth IRAs, which was up from 11.9% in 2019. So in 3 years, Roth IRA ownership went up almost 50%.
Well, it went from
11.9% to 16.1%. That's almost a 50% increase in ownership of a Roth IRA. And
that's much lower. Actually, I thought it would be higher if you were to ask me. But that's a good improvement. 50% is a good improvement.
Well, it depends. I mean, there's a certain amount of people that they're likely going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And there are people that's going to happen to.
Yeah, true.
Like, honestly, my parents are one of those people. What they earn won't be their tax bracket in retirement, likely. I mean, they're retired. I know it's not. So, people need to think about what the Roth IRA accomplishes, right? It helps preserve assets from taxation later, all those different things. And you have to put a little thought as to why you own it. So why I do a lot in a Roth, well, I think we've discussed it. My wife likes California, so if we ever have to go there someday, I'm not paying state of California income tax.
It's the you can live in California someday strategy, having a Roth.
I love it. That's what we're going to start calling it, how to live in California. A couple other things that I thought were pretty striking as I pull it out of this article, Elias, is the increase overall ownership of 401k plans since 1992. Defined contribution only households, meaning they don't have any pension. So defined contribution means 401k, Roth IRA, etc. It's up more than 70%. In 1992, 37.5% of households had only a defined contribution plan, which a defined contribution plan is 401k, IRA type plan. In 2022, it's 64%. And I was actually shocked that it's that low. It means there's still 37% of households out there have a pension. What's it going to be in 20 years?
Well, it's possible. I mean, my first response would be less, but then, there are a few bigger companies bringing pension back. So now I don't think that's such an easy question to answer anymore, because it is possible it could become more popular again.
Yeah, but I was shocked it was only 63% because I wouldn't say 1 in 3 people we work with have a pension.
That's probably right.
I'd like to know the stats on meaningful pension, because someone could add a pension that was frozen 20 years ago and gives them $400 a month.
And those would all be included.
Yeah, those would be included in that number. So those are just some. They release this study every year, and it just shows the rise of IRAs and 401ks in our society. And I think the takeaway for people is, whether you like it or not, individuals are more and more responsible for how they're going to provide for their retirement. Employers aren't providing for your retirement anymore. They're providing an avenue to get you to retirement, but they're not providing the retirement.
And there is, which has led to, and this is from a survey, so 55-year-old Americans, they surveyed people 10 years away from standard retirement date. 55-year-old Americans are critically unprepared for retirement. Part of that is because we've transitioned from pension being a big retirement benefit to you have to save money in these different vehicles on your own. And there's a new term out there called the silver squatters. So a silver squatter is when you're considering going to live with a child, an adult child, and live whatever, an extra bedroom. Maybe they have a space there that they could remodel or just whatever it is. And there was some insight into here on how to think of ways to think about retirement when you're feeling unprepared and then maybe make the best of the situation. I think some of the takeaways for me on this are we've developed a system here in America now where you have to save for your own retirement. So I think, one, how do you end up being 55 and not feel critically unprepared? You have to get started with saving and investing, and also acknowledge that it's going to be your responsibility to make sure that this goes right in your life. So for younger listeners, the easiest way to get prepared is get something going. And if you have something going, maybe look for ways to improve that situation. Now, for the silver squatters, there was some good insight in here on how to bring up these conversations, and kind of the first tip was don't start the conversation by saying, I'm going to move in with you. I thought, well, that's kind of why would you go up to your child? I'm going to move in with you. That's probably not going to be a good starting place. But I think I tend to agree with some of the information, if you can be proactive about the conversation and be honest about it. Hey, we're not as prepared as we should be. Can we potentially get some help and live with you? I do think there's some unintended consequences that come from this, because now we're going to have a generation that, one, they're raising their parents because their parents are living with them, and they're raising their own kids at the same time. And I don't know the potential outcomes or what that would cause, but it seems like, and maybe that's why I'm thinking of this. I've maybe read this somewhere, but then it's almost like now that the generation of raising parents and raising kids, you're kind of sandwiched in there in between these two other generations, trying to help them both out.
That's exactly what it's called, is the sandwich generation.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just thinking, wow, I just made up a good term, but I must have read that somewhere.
Molly probably put it in an outline.
I did not coin that.
Well, I mean, it goes back to, it lends a question. Why is the adult parent moving in? Is it because they need help or they ran out of resources? And we don't know the answer to that. But it makes me think of, what are some of the things people can do to actually develop a really sound retirement plan? And if you start to look at the things that would make a sound retirement plan, I saw a chart put out by JP Morgan. I think they put out some really great stuff. They have their guide to markets, but they had this thing called the retirement equation. And if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. If not, go to btwellshow.com. We'll put the chart on there, but it breaks retirement into 6 categories. And here's the beauty of it. There's 2 you can control. You have total control of. There's 2 you have some control of, and 2 you have no control of. And we've talked a lot about, the things you can control is where you should focus your time. All the other stuff, you should drown the noise. So let me cover it. Here's what we can control: how much we save versus spend, and our asset allocation. We have total control over those 2 things, right? We have some control over how much we earn and how long we work and how long we live, which I think when you say longevity, it's counterintuitive, but we do. I mean, science tells us
healthy choices, you're most likely going to
healthy
live longer.
choices, get some exercise, you're likely going to live longer. So you have some control over that. But here's what we can't control: market returns, governmental policy benefits, and tax. So where does everybody want to spend their time focusing on? How much my investment's made, what's going to happen with the political landscape, and what are taxes going to be? You can't control any of those things.
Those are outside of the sphere of control.
So people who are trying to set up a good retirement plan and put together, what they think is right. The places to focus: saving and spending and asset allocation. Those are the things you can control.
You can. And at 55, I think another thing I want to bring up, if you're feeling like a lot of people in the survey critically unprepared, and you could stretch it to even 70, but 10 to 15 years, is that enough time to, maybe hit all of your financial goals? Probably not, depending on what those goals are. But with still 10 years left to work, can you get the ship pointed in the right direction and improve your situation? Absolutely. You can. You might not get to a point where you might have to start to, I guess, rein in your retirement expectations, right? If you haven't done a good job preparing and you always thought, I'm going to go buy a second home somewhere and live somewhere in the winter and then live somewhere different in the summer, that might not be reality for you anymore. But could you set yourself up to have a reality of having one home that you like to have and it's paid off and you can enjoy a lifestyle? Might not be what you envision, but you can still have a good life.
Sometimes people are envisioning their dream retirement, not the reality.
Those two things might not be aligned if you're 55 and unprepared.
Let's be honest. If you couldn't afford a second home while you're working, why would you be able to afford a second home when you're retired?
That's a great upside down question.
Seriously,
the answer is I don't think I could.
Most people can't. The people who end up buying second homes when they retire, they could have afforded it while they were working. They just didn't have the time, so they chose not to do it. But, if you make $100,000 a year, it's going to be challenging to have a primary residence and a vacation place, because it's not just paying for the vacation place. It's paying for taxes and insurance and maintenance and double everything. So I think sometimes people, I actually had someone come in here not too long ago, and they're telling me all the things they want to do at 55. And when I looked at their finances, I didn't even need to do a plan. I'm like, those will never work.
They're telling you all the things they want to do?
Yeah, I was like, retire at 55 and spend $25,000 a year on travel and live on this. And I'm like, well, you're 40 and you have $100,000 saved. Like, these numbers will never work, and you don't make enough money to get there.
Yeah, tough pill to swallow, but
yeah. So
right, but
they were laying out the dream, and it's not possible. So you have to have some realistic expectations of what retirement's going to be. Ideally for people, this would be ideal. You get to retire and continue your same lifestyle all the way through retirement.
And if you accomplish that, that's a great accomplishment. There's nothing to be taken away from people that do that. A really good graph of it's comparing characteristics of retirees with no major financial regrets. So 71% of people without major financial regrets have an investment portfolio. Probably makes sense, right?
Yeah.
They have some sort of investment they've done, which to me, just they've saved some money and invested it. 90% of people with no major financial regrets feel they have a good or excellent current financial situation. And I think let's define, okay, good or excellent current financial situation. You just said something that I think that highlights it. You've stopped working and your lifestyle didn't change. That's hard enough to accomplish without all these other second homes and dreams and blah, blah, blah. So, and I would imagine that's, if you feel you have a good or excellent current financial situation in retirement, that's probably the basic part of it, right? Your lifestyle's the same and you're not working anymore. You'd probably answer that question that way. 85% of people with no major financial regrets have identified financial goals for retirement. It's a good start, right? You've identified what are my goals for this part of my life. Now this next one, which I wish the number was higher, but I knew this one was going to be lower. 50% have a written financial plan. I think there's a little bit of correlation, though, between people who have identified their goals and have a written financial plan. They may not be exactly the same, but at least identifying your goals, that's part of the planning process.
These are
right?
people that feel confident.
Yeah, no major financial regrets. So they feel confident.
So 50% of the people did a plan.
Yep, 50% of people with no major financial regrets have done a written plan.
Well, and so I always think about the numbers behind this stuff. Who do they interview? Because let's think about this. If somebody had $25 million,
you might not need a financial plan.
do they need a written financial plan to show them how long their money's going to last? They could if they're spending $1 million a year. But if they've accumulated and they're spending $150,000 a year, it's pretty easy to make it work.
Correct.
So that's where sometimes you got to read behind the lines a little bit.
Yeah, and that is true. I think what this is, I think the gist of this whole study, they wanted to get to, like, what's the secret sauce of retiring without regret? And I think so. It's
being prepared.
Correct.
That's
what all these things are lending to. It's being prepared. And then it has people without major regrets and then people with major financial regrets. So 72% of people that don't have major financial regrets have used professional advice.
Do you know why they don't have regrets?
Well, I would hope if you're using professional advice, you got the outcome you wanted.
They may have already had that outcome without the professional advice, but they had somebody show them and quantify to them that they were going to be okay and they weren't just winging it.
I'm sure a lot of that's where the professional comes in place.
Right. It wasn't because they made more money, but they had somebody show them and say, hey, look, if you do these things, you're going to have a great retirement. Where so many people who don't take professional advice, they're winging it. They are. They don't really know how much money they can spend. They'll go use a rule of thumb, 4%. Well, okay, that might work. Or you might vastly underspend in retirement.
You could pretend. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of times you would underspend if you're just following a rule of thumb. So, and 62% of people without regrets, they easily understood how to use retirement savings. Kind of goes back to a couple of our other topics about defined contribution plans. And I think this one kind of lends itself to an education, right? If you're educated on the different options and how they work, you can more easily make a decision about it. And people inherently, when people don't understand something, they just inherently default to, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to do what feels safe, which is maybe not necessarily the best way to make the decision. And the last category was rarely worry about daily expenses. So, 75% of people without major financial regrets rarely worry about daily expenses. That number seems a little bit low, but I bet even people...
like 95 wouldn't worry about it, But
you know what? The survey was done in a time of really high inflation. So I bet you can have no major regrets, and daily expenses are on a lot of people's mind right now.
Yeah, you're right. Kids, it's just, man, my groceries were $300. It's
not
that
they
really
can still
worry about
afford
it.
it.
It's just top of mind.
Yeah, then they can still afford it, but it is a poke in the eye. Inflation it is what it is. It's a poke in the eye that just keeps poking, I guess. Never goes away.
Well, with that said, I want to thank everybody for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help with your financial plan, you can go to btwellshow.com. If you're not following us on social, we're on Facebook, X, YouTube. Please go to those platforms to check out more episodes. Want to thank everybody for listening, and hopefully you tune in next week.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Premier Investments and Wealth Management and LPL Financial do not provide tax advice. Please consult your tax professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance reference is historical and is not a guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal,